team back again today. I'm just going to wait for Chris from the Health and Fitness Guy to jump on, and then we're going to get started today. Today's topic is going to be around keto, low carb, intermittent fasting. We'll probably talk about a few other random things too, just because it tends to happen when I'm on the phone with Chris, because he just knows so much about everything. So I will add him in as soon as I can see him, and then we can kick off. Hey Pip. Hey B. I'll just grab Chriso on. So as usual, the materials and content that we talk about is recommended as general information only. It's not to be used as a substitute for professional medical advice, diagnosis or treatment. So, obviously don't be a pelican. Talk to your healthcare practitioner. So if you guys don't know Chris, if you're not following over on the Health and Fitness Guy, Chris is a stay-at-home dad of 3 kids. He is one of the smartest blokes I've ever met. He knows everything about so many different topics. He's also one of the kindest, most genuine humans you'll ever meet. He has a program called Primal Fenix. So this is the training program that I use. I'll just add Chriso in. So his program is the program that I use and train to at home. And the great thing about Primal Fenix is that you can do it in the space of your own living room. Hey, Chriso.
G'day, how are you?
You don't need any equipment or anything like that. So seriously, it takes like 20 minutes a day. Lots of mobility stuff. I love Chris's philosophy around training, because he's not about, lifting 400 kilos over your head. He's all about being mobile for life. And that's important at any age, no matter what your fitness level, no matter what your strength. You need to be able to, be mobile for life, because we all want to live happy, healthy, strong, able-bodied lives. We don't want to be, hobbling around at the age of 50. So that's where Chris's philosophy comes in. So I might let Chris introduce himself to you guys and tell a bit about himself, and then we'll kick on.
Hey, Shannon. Well, thanks so much for having me. Yeah, look, I think you covered it all. My specialty is bodyweight training, which I've styled as Primal Fenix. So it's really combining that primal ability to move, just base movements of crawling, etc., with calisthenics. Fenix as part of that calisthenics word, meaning beautifully strong. So really trying to get people to embrace this concept of just being this beautifully strong, capable, physically, physical specimen that we all are and all can be, if we go about things efficiently and effectively to minimize stress and to really get your body in a position where you can control it in diverse movements. And that's what Primal Fenix is all about.
So, Chris, can you give people a bit of an idea about, obviously you are an incredible coach, strength and conditioning coach, and you've trained everybody from school teams to Olympic athletes. So can you just give people a bit of a rundown about the different, not even just, you've obviously trained people at Olympic level, but just the variety of different modalities of fitness that you've worked with?
Yeah, sure. I mean, that's the thing about movement training, which is what I'm trying to do. It all starts in the brain. So, it's not, about how strong you are. It's not about how far you can run or how fast you are. It's about getting your brain and body to communicate effectively. And that's why I can have an Olympic gold medalist, which, I've coached several, right beside somebody in their 50s or older doing the exact same session, because it is all about movement. It's all about getting your brain and body communicating and working effectively together. So that's how it's such a diverse problem, and that's the beauty of that's the diversity of the program. That's a beauty of the program, but also a curse in regards to selling it, because everyone says you need a specialty. You need to hit someone who's 35 who wants bikini body, which is kind of not what I do. I'm all about sort of that longevity. So, I'm currently working with some professional sporting teams and athletes online as well, right down to some teenagers that I coach looking to get fitter for football.
Yeah, awesome. So, I mean, you've worked with swimmers, you've worked with football players, you've worked with, everybody in every different type of sport. So it's not specific to, any type of person, and it's not specific to any type of age. If you're 70, you should still be able to squat down without putting your hip out. And, if you're a new mum, obviously there's movements that you need to be able to do to safely get that baby around for the next, 2 years until they want to put their legs on the ground.
Exactly right. So my training is not functional training. There's nothing functional about doing a bear crawl or doing a lizard or doing an iguana or any of that. But what it does do is get you functional, because it gets you in the ability to control your body through diverse, complex movements, so that when you're living your life and you're called upon to do, say, an athletic endeavour like bend, twist, pick up the kids whilst holding the groceries, etc., you are capable of doing that. And that's what it's all about, whether you're a professional athlete right down to teenagers, mums, or anyone and everyone in between. And that really encompasses the broad study that I've had in the past. So I've done anything from high school teacher to history to health science. I've done Chinese medicine, massage, nutrition. I've almost completed my naturopathy degree, and I've got several or a couple of dozen qualifications in various personal training fields. So it's really trying to draw all these ideas into a system that you just then follow without really having to think, and then if you just stick with the system, you do get the results you need.
Absolutely. So even though your training is not a bikini body guide, chances are you could end up with a body that you can put a bikini on and be really confident and really happy with. Not that you couldn't with any body, actually. All you need to do for having a bikini body is put a bikini on your body.
Exactly right. I mean, and that's the big thing is, for me, it's all about being pain-free. 3 knee reconstructions in my teens and 20s, and then having the tumor in my head in my late 20s. I just wanted to be able to move again. I wanted to take my arms above my head. I wanted to be able to squat pain-free, and I wanted to be able to play with my kids at the park. The then design of aesthetics, or the results of aesthetics as a result of the program, is just an accessory. It's a benefit. It's one of the benefits of the program. It's not the main goal. If that's the main goal, when you have that, you're then just trying to sustain that or something like that, and it requires dedicated consistency to get to that one thing at the exclusion of all other results. Whereas if you're looking at this as a long-term program, then aesthetics are a part of feeling good, moving well, being pain-free, tackling things physically that you want to do. It's just one element of it all. And yes, I certainly think that if you stick with this program and how I try to deliver it with all the additional, coaching, then you can get a good physique and something to wear your Speedos in or your bikinis or whatever it is for you, and just feel comfortable in that.
Yeah. So it's not designed to be a bikini bodyguard, but the side effect is that you're probably going to look shit hot anyway.
Fingers crossed, yes.
So let's dive into the important things. What I would like to know is, what have you had to eat today?
This morning I had a coffee, and then I had one of my molten lava shakes, is what I call it. So it is not in any way reflective of food porn that you get thrown out there. You can't photograph this and post it and have, oohs and ahs about how good it looks. I stick in a bit of egg whites. I stick in some broccoli, spinach, kale, some mixed berries, a little bit of MCT oil, a couple of bits and pieces of, some greens powder, and cinnamon, and then I blend it all up, and it comes out in a frozen, gooey sort of lumpy thing that I drink down, and I find that I have that, and I'll probably eat again, maybe early afternoon or maybe dinner.
Do you add protein to that?
No, I add, so the egg whites have, my sort of 20 grams of protein in it. I also add in the some hemp seeds. And I find that between those two things that I'm getting enough protein. I mean, unless you have just trained, the most amount of protein you'll probably really digest effectively in one sitting sits around about 20 grams, generally speaking. So for my meals, unless it's post-training, I'll aim to sort of go, I'll roughly have a look at it and go, okay, well, how much, carbs, fat, protein, nutrients am I getting in here? And if it roughly looks like it's hitting the 20 grams, then it's pretty good. and for my morning shakes, I know that I'm getting around about that 20 to 30 grams of protein, which is enough for me because I'm efficiently absorbing what I need to. I'm not sort of going, 40 or 50 grams, which is what would happen if I added protein into it, simply because if you have that excess protein, it's just broken down by a process called gluconeogenesis, which means that those proteins are getting converted into just some simple sugars and excreted or used as a result. So, minimal effective dose in regards to all types of food, in regards to almost anything and everything, including exercise.
So any particular reason why you do just egg whites and not the whole egg?
It's cheaper and it's easier. So I buy like a big 1 litre bag of egg whites and I just tip it in. For me in the morning, it's just about not thinking. If I overthink it, then I don't do it. And, between getting up and so the night before I write out my sort of daily buy-in for the next morning, what exercises I want to do. And then, packing school lunches, getting the breakfast ready for kids, getting the kids out the door, trying to work out what I'm going to do that day work-wise. I don't have cognitive energy to expend on kind of trying to decide what to add in. I sort of know what I'm getting in that shake now. I do happily put in egg whites because yes, generally full eggs, because yes, generally you do want the whole egg. But I've just been finding that for me, that's the easiest way for me to measure out 200 mils of egg white and also the most cost effective, etc.
Yep, awesome. Okay, so we've got a few questions today. A lot of them revolve around keto, low carb, bit around intermittent fasting. So
sure.
One question was, what sort of carbohydrates are ideal post Primal Authentic's training session?
Look, carbohydrates they're either loathed or loved depending on what you feel you're sitting. So if you're, there's two ways to look at it. You could train fasted and really extend that fast out post-training to boost up some of the pathways that help you really increase, the effects of the exercise in regards to how they affect your metabolism and blood sugars, etc. The other way is you kind of train fasted and then, you can reload your glycogen essentially through having some carbs. If you're going to have any carbs, it doesn't really matter if it's post-training, before training, or any time of the day. You kind of want to just go for carbs that are good in a way that contain your fiber. So, your vegetables, some fruits are okay if they fit within your spectrum for the day, etc. So, you don't want to go for something like simple sugars to really spike your blood sugars afterwards, like a sports drink or juice. You want to look at it as in, how does that tie into your day? So don't, apart from say protein intake post-training, look at it in regards to a whole food source. So, what can I eat now that I'm happy to eat that doesn't, either require much energy or thought to think about, that's good and healthy, that fits into my eating plan for the day and for the week, and look at it more in regards to that, if I could suggest that. So if rice fits into your eating plan, then have your rice. If no carbs fit into your eating plan, have no carbs. If banana or apple or an orange fits into your eating plan and you're designed your week around how you structure your meals and that fits in there, then that's good to go. But I think you need to kind of have a look at it from this overarching perspective of, did I earn these carbs? Does this fit into my eating plan for the week? Is it good whole food, etc.?
And I think it totally depends on people's carb tolerance as well. I think when we're talking about keto doesn't mean that everybody needs to eat under 50 grams of carbs a day. If you have a really good carbohydrate tolerance, you could be upwards of 150 grams of carbs a day, still be in ketosis if they're whole food carbs, you're eating them post-training and you've had a really big session. That could totally not disturb that situation. If you've got really poor blood sugar regulation and you have a really low carb tolerance because you've been jacked up on shitty carbs all your life and processed sugar, your carb tolerance is probably way down low and you can probably, get it right out of there until you get fat adapted.
Exactly right. And so the perspective on ketosis is always about how low you take your carbs, and it's like cut out all carbs. Carbs are the most evil things in the world. And it doesn't, my perspective doesn't really, go into that. It's more how much carbs can you have um, while still having elevated rates of beta oxidation, so conversion of fats to fuel as your energy source, so ketones. And then again, yes, you will then look at timing. So if you train in the morning, then you can, I think would be better to abstain from having those carbs, really get through the day as best you can, then have those carbohydrates at night once you've had them in a big whole food source. So you might have some rice or extra veggies with dinner, etc. And what that also does, when combined with, say, the protein intake at night and the fats, it really helps reset some of the neurotransmitter production that happens at night during sleep time. So having those carbs at night is great. You've been asleep all night and you've woken up, you don't want to then have your carbs first in the morning because you've hopefully stabilised your blood sugars, etc. So that's, again, just another layer of thought adding into it, comes back to, how is your week plan for training? How is your week plan for food intake? And what sort of food are you eating? Crow's joining in, isn't he?
Fucking crows. Seriously. And they're close enough that I can probably just throw something at them too. I'm just trying to work out what it is I'm willing to sacrifice to throw at them. Oh, so annoying. Yeah, I tend to find as well, I wouldn't say that I do keto or, but I think because I tend not to eat refined carbohydrates, my diet is probably lower carb than the general punter who's still eating a lot of processed carbs. I did find for me though, I tend to train, if I try and train in the mornings, and I will train fasted. But I tend to really like to have my carbs at night with my dinner. I find that my sleep goes to shit if I go too low carb, and especially at night, I find it just really helps my sleep. It helps my hormones. It just helps me feel more recovered if I have a good dose of good starchy carbs before bed.
Exactly right, and that does a couple of things. One is those starchy carbs, etc., can help with some of those prebiotic fibers in the lower digestive tract. So it really helps with digestion and settling you overnight. Secondly, as I sort of said, those carbs in the early evening, etc., do help as precursors to the development of things like serotonin, which is then again converted into melatonin, which is then going to help you sleep. If you have excessive protein intake at night with low carbohydrate, and that ratio is massively out, that's why people often say on keto, I get really anxious or my sleep goes out the window, simply because that ratio of protein to carbs affects, the development of serotonin production. So there are things there to look at. And I think you also hit it on the head as well when you said it works for you. There is no one-size-fits-all approach. You kind of need to experiment and go, okay, well, how does this eating pattern, and that's what I talk about, eating patterns. Some people, based off genetic profiling, will really need to eat some of that stuff in the morning, and that's okay because it fits into what they're doing, their circadian rhythm, etc. So don't be afraid to kind of, take some ideas and kind of going, well, how am I going to make this work into my life and into my rhythm and into what works best for me? Because I can only train at night, etc., etc. So there's lots of ways of always just trying to be open to new ideas and self-experiment to work out what works for you.
And I think as well, it's getting to a point where you're very intuitive about your body, because I think a lot of people go low carb or keto or paleo or vegan or whatever their choice is that month, and it works for them for a little while until it doesn't. And for some people, instead of kind of going, okay, what about this situation has changed to maybe evaluate why this isn't working for me now? Am I more stressed? Is my sleep out of whack? Are my hormones out of whack? Like, they're just not taking into account those things. Their idea is, I will keto harder, I will paleo harder, I will vegan harder. And that's not the answer. The answer is not vegan harder or paleo harder or go even lower carb. The answer is work out what else has changed in there. And just because something worked for you for a time doesn't mean it will work for you forever.
Exactly right. And you touched on two of probably the most important ideas that I try to convey across to people. One, tools. So keto and all these different styles of eating, they are simply tools. So having not just being invested in just one mindset and one tool, I'd like to think that I have quite an open paradigm to my coaching, and I can then therefore direct people to experiment and help them navigate that experimentation process to find out what works for them. All these different things are tools to work out what's the best thing that you can use. And it essentially comes back to eating good food that you can manage long term is the best thing to do. But every now and then you might want to invest in a tool to get you to, the next level. So don't be completely die hard about the one tool to the exclusion of all others. The second thing is tied into that is what I call the check-in. Now that can happen once a week, once a month, once every 3 months, or whatever it is in your life. And that's where you sit down with a glass of wine, a beer, whatever it is, a glass of tea, whatever floats your boat, that you can just sit down quietly for a little while. You get yourself a notepad and pen and you sit down and you go, hey,
lock your children
the last month, you lock them away, get a babysitter. I often do this and I'll pay a babysitter. So this weekend, my wife and I, we're doing our check-in together. We've hired a babysitter and we're going out to a tea shop and we're just going to sit down and talk not only about how we have both been going, but our relationship. We're going to talk about all these different things. So the check-in is one of my most important aspects, because you then sit down and hey, I've been die-hard keto for the last month, die-hard vegan, die-hard only eating green foods before 1 a.m. or whatever it is. And you then go, has this worked? How do I feel? What am I missing out on? What have my stresses been? How are my relationships? How's my life going? And you just expunge, you get all that out of your brain. And then you'll then very clearly, over a couple of check-ins, go, it all comes back to that I hate doing this. Or if I'm locked in, this sucks. Or if I have no clear plan and I have to make decisions, it just gets thrown out the window because I have no clear plan and I can't make any more decisions, being a mum, looking after kids, driving them to school, doing afternoon activities, then trying to decide what to do for dinner. So, so we've really invest in checking into your life and what's working for you. And you can also take that a step further. And that's why people say keep training journals. They go, oh, look, over the past month, I've hit these numbers, or I didn't hit these numbers. And then you're supposed to look back at your training journals and go, oh, well, I haven't done this accessory exercise. Take it a step further, invest that check-in process into your life emotionally, into your eating paradigms, into your lifestyle, into your relationships. And that then becomes really, really effective and important, embracing the concept of tools, not, full-on systems that if you do it, you do it, if you don't, you don't, sort of thing, and the check-in.
Yeah, and I think as well, it's really important to implement things into your life. Like, I think everyone has certain times in their life where they have a specific goal, and it might be a wedding, a holiday, whatever it is, where they think I need to get in shape for X, or I want to get healthier for falling pregnant, whatever it is. They have a certain period of time where there is a certain goal. And I get that, but I think in general, you need to adopt habits that can be a lifestyle, not something that can be an 8-week challenge or a 12-week, keto or whatever it is. That you've got to implement habits that are things that just become part of your lifestyle. It's not that I'm paleo. I actually just don't eat gluten and dairy because I know they make me feel like shit. So is that to say I will never eat them? No. I mean, every now and again, put a cheese platter in front of me, give me the cheese, I'll deal with the gut ache later. But for the most part, it's actually easy to make healthy choices because I know what makes me feel good and what doesn't.
Exactly right. I couldn't have said it better myself.
Okay, so good question here. What is the difference in benefits between keto and intermittent fasting?
they both have a lot of similar benefits. So, down regulation of your insulin growth like factor 1, which increases cellular turnover. If you think about the more times that cell turns over, the more chance it has producing a defect, and that defect can be, an illness, cancer or whatever it may be potentially. Um, yeah, exactly. They can basically, they can both help with blood sugar regulation. They can both help with resetting, essentially your metabolism to a degree. And they can both either be short-term implementations, or they can both be long-term implementations based on what you think you can and cannot do. Probably the big difference is, going forward, that consistent keto will have you in an increased level of beta oxidation. So, the use of fats as your primary fuel source. So that's probably the primary, mechanism there. The intermittent fasting is something that you can get a big bang for your buck once a month if you do it like that. So that's generally how I'll try and do it, once a month, for anywhere from, an extra half a day, an extra day, right up to sort of 60 hours. So, you can use either one. I wouldn't suggest one is better than the other. Again, it's just a tool you can use. But with any tool you're going to use, do so with the thought process that, okay, well, if I'm going to do this intermittent fasting, do I then go break my fast with McDonald's or croissants or whatever? Do I then use this intermittent fasting to kind of implement now, Shannon's 21-day healthy eating plan that's all about food? Or do I then go, hey, this ketosis, yeah, I'm into this and I'm going to give this a good 6 to 12 months, because with, ketosis, you really need that 3 to 12 months of being in it to really embrace all the benefits of it. So you need to either commit to it, or you need to then look at it and go, hey, I'm going to do this keto for a 1 to 3 month period, once a year, etc. So again, how does it fit into what you want to achieve? How does it fit into what you can manage? How does it fit into the energy that you can expend in investing into that setup of that program?
So if someone wants to get on board and start doing keto, I think there's a lot of people doing keto real badly, and they think that I'm going to go keto because it's free reign to eat bacon cooked in butter with a side of bacon. And that is not, okay, maybe technically that's keto, but that's not actually keto in any sort of health. If someone wants to start doing keto, what would you say a day on their plate would look like? And also, how do they measure if they're in ketosis, short of actually getting not a glucometer, but the thingamajigger that measures ketone production?
Yeah, the ketone reader. Yeah. Okay, so 3 parts to your question. I think one would be transitioning into keto. You can do that 2 to 3 ways. One, you could go intermittent fasting for 24 to 60 hours. By the end of that period, you would have diminished glycogen and within your system and body enough that you would be starting to break down, fatty tissue, etc. Then you would then go straight into a keto eating plan.
Okay, on that.
Second one.
How likely is the general punter to be able to go from a standard Australian diet to a 60-hour fast without actually killing somebody?
Yeah, look, it's pretty tough. It can be pretty deadly. So you need to, and that's what I'm saying, if you're going to do it, you need to have a big system and plan in place. Like, you can't be doing that and making the kids porridge for breakfast or cooking, roast lamb for dinner sort of thing.
Or really probably talking.
I've done it before. Oh, mate, I've done it before, and I've had like a bone broth, lamb bone broth on for 2 days. So the whole house has smelt of lamb bone broth, and I almost just licked the wallpaper at one point. So you've got to have that system in place. You've got to have a white room for 2 days sort of thing. So there's one way to do that. You could do that intermittent fasting with the assistance of some products. So every now and then I'll recommend people do like this Rebig with some supplements that I use. But again, I don't like to just throw the supplements at them. If they're going to do it, I like to actually sit with them through that process and coach them through that personally. So, I mean, that's something that I do offer. I would say their chances of really sticking to that 60 hours straight is a bit tough. Sorry, what was that?
Do you mean exogenous ketones is something you would
work
in there? Yeah. we'll talk a bit more about it.
Because what is yeah, we'll come back to that shortly. So that's that's one way to do it. It would be quite stressful and quite tough. So you really need the mechanisms and the thought processes and the plan in place of like, how am I going to deal with how tough this is going to be? Because you also have to think if most people drink coffees, etc. There's going to be caffeine withdrawal added onto that, and that's going to be tough. The other way to do it is to kind of transition your eating over the course of 1 to 4 weeks, starting to down-regulate your carbohydrate intake with resulting increase in your intake of fats, into then a fast, and then into the 24 to 60 hour fast, then into ketosis, or going to reducing your carbohydrate intake as you increase your fat intake, and then into the ketosis program.
Yeah.
So that was that one. What was the other question? What was? Forgotten.
I don't know, mate.
No, but I think that's the easiest way to.
So how would you work?
How do you measure ketones? So if you're not going to do the sort of the ketone blood reader, which costs about $50 or $60 plus strips, or the breathalyzer, which costs anywhere from $100 to $200, there's a couple of things. You'll get a breath that's quite almost metallic, almost smells a little bit like nail polish, and you will have an increased, odor in your mouth, and that's just ketones being expunged via ketone byproducts being expunged via the respiratory system. The second thing is your wee will also increase in smell, as well as quantity. So you will be urinating quite a lot more. You will be initially during transition a lot more fatigued. So you need to really increase your hydration as well as salt levels. And then the third one, and quite a positive one, is you should start to really go, oh, hey, that's 10 o'clock and I'm hungry, as opposed to, hey, it's 7 a.m. and I need to eat 9 pieces of toast and porridge. So you will have increased levels of energy, cognitive, brain fog will dissipate, and you'll feel a lot more sharper and just on tack, and your energy should go up if you've transitioned well enough. Otherwise, one of the byproducts negatively in that transition process is you're going to feel pretty horrible. So you either know you're on track and you've got to stick with it and monitor that with stress and proper food, or hopefully you get the positive benefits.
Yep. Okay, so I had a specific question come through from a female. She was doing keto, or pretty low carb. So I don't know whether, technically keto, but very low carb, practicing intermittent fasting, I think every day. Female, training about 5 times a week, I think at quite decent intensity. She had so she'd been losing weight for the first month or so and then hit a weight loss plateau. What are your thoughts around why that happened and how to get past that?
Yeah, sure. From that one there, you need to kind of look at it like an onion. There are lots and lots of layers there to that equation. One, she's female, so I'm assuming, 20 to 40, so still menstruating and ovulating each month. She's training hard, so she's expending a lot of energy. And also, the menstrual system is very much intertwined with the hormone system, which is very much intertwined with how you eat, etc. So if she's, if she's in that calorie deficit from cutting out all her carbs, then that will at some point cause her to, result in a little bit of stress, which is going to cause that menstrual system to go off, and cause somewhat of almost like a threat response, where the body then goes, hey, I'm in starvation mode now because I'm getting punished. I'm in a calorie deficit. I'm not getting enough food, etc. Therefore, any calories I'm going to get, I'm going to almost try and hold on to. So with that, I would probably suggest, with intermittent fasting, for a lot of people, I suggest just do it, maybe 5 days a week, Monday to Friday. And then on the weekends, particularly for females as well, is kind of having the breakfast, Saturday, Sunday, where you actually sit down and you really enjoy cooking and planning and enjoying the meal. And that just breaks up, the cycle of it a little bit. You have to very much monitor, and this is two of the biggest things I see when people transition into keto and intermittent fasting. You need to transition and assess and monitor your training to reflect that. So during that first month, you're essentially changing your engine from unleaded fuel to diesel. So you can't just all of a sudden turn up to the petrol station and plug diesel in and think it's going to work great. You need to take it to the shop and change the physiology of that machine. And that's what you're essentially doing when you're transitioning from carb dependence after having many years into a fat use. So you really need to kind of spend a bit of time again, how I'm parking my car in the shop here and it's getting work done on it. So ease up that training, adjust your training levels, monitor your fatigue, monitor your performance, etc., to see if you're adjusting well. Not only that, but if you're going to reduce that carb, then you need to really make sure that you're increasing your fat intake. And that's one of the big things I see is people go, well, I've reduced my carb intake, therefore I'm automatically in ketosis. But when you withdraw a fuel source, you need to replace a fuel source. The issue most people has is they just replace that carb with increased protein. And as I stated at the very start, that increased protein is just going to break down into simple sugars, but you're never really going to replace the carbs that you cut out with that amount of protein, and you're still low in fat. So drop the carbs, work out what protein level you need, and then increase the fats to replace that. Monitor your training and transition that over a 1 to 3 month period, and it can be quite a lot of transition period. They're anywhere up to 9 months or more for people to really transition effectively. The final thing is, if I can, with ladies, the menstrual cycle, with ketosis, etc. When ladies are going into that ovulation phase and prior to the actual menses, there are lots of changes to your hormones there. So you don't really want to have your body in a hyper-stressed state. So depending on how you respond to carbs premenstrually, you might either increase your carbohydrates premenstrually or during the menstruation or post-menstruation, based on what works for you. If you get a lot of water retention, etc., and bloating premenstrually, then you probably won't do it before. You'll do it maybe during, but if that causes issue during, you won't do it during, you might do it afterwards. So again, it comes back to work out what works best for you, do a check-in and ask yourself these questions. What have I done before? How hard am I going? How does my body go each month with my cycle, etc.? And then kind of you'll very quickly start to see some of the answers yourself. And then if you're going to transition into that ketosis, do it with some guidance. And I think that is one of the big missing components. Reading a little, book is great, but also get that information and keep trying to find more.
Yeah. My initial thought with that straight away was you're probably not eating enough food. And I would always suggest to people, I'm not one for tracking calories or even macronutrients really, unless you have a specific goal in place. But if you're making a big transition to a whole new way of eating, I think that tracking your calories for at least a few days for you to get an idea about what's happening is a really good idea, because I think particularly for women, there's a real propensity to undereat, and without even meaning to, but when you cut out all refined carbohydrates and, like you said, you don't replace that with enough fat, there's not enough fuel, and your body is going to freak out. It's going to think it's going into starvation, and you'll lose weight until it goes into that full stress mode and starts going, right, store, put it all on the arse and hold on to it. My other thought too was around sleep and general stress in life. You might have started doing intermittent fasting or keto at a time where the rest of the stress in your life was fairly low, but all of a sudden your relationship is stressful, or your work's stressful, or you're adding to that stress, or you're not sleeping enough, and that's all another stress for your life.
Yeah, exactly right. So very good points there. I think for the second one, like for myself, so November, December, January, I had a pretty stressful few months. So it's probably not ideal, but I did increase my carb intake a little bit at night, especially. I did also massively reduce my training loads. So I was down to maybe 15 or 20 minutes a day during those periods, because I just didn't think that I could expend that extra energy and deal with the emotional and physical stresses of what I was trying to do. Now that I'm trying to come out of that period, I bumped my training up a little bit and alter the diets to a degree. So it's again just checking in and assessing how you're going and how are all your levels of stuff happening. Again, with going back to that macronutrient profiling, that's something that I've created in this in my app that's coming out, and it's basically getting people to go, hey, I do high fat, low carb. And what they mean is they've cut all their carbs out and they've massively increased their protein. So they're having 6 sausages and bacon as opposed to 1 or 2 sausages. So it's kind of going, hey, this is actually what the numbers look like when you're doing high fat and low carb. And then getting people to look at the meals they have and track it. And they'll very quickly go, I just don't eat enough protein and I eat nowhere near enough fats. But my carbs are up here and I thought I was low carb. And you can then just very quickly coach them through it. So it's, again, yeah, using that as a tool to implement that strategy that you want to have at that time and place.
Yeah. I have so many more questions for you, but I think we need to wrap up today.
Sure.
I think maybe we'll do this again in the next couple of weeks because we've got heaps more questions to get through. And I would really like to do a bit of a keto 101. What does a day on your plate look like if you're doing keto well? Because I think I think a lot of people are doing keto badly, and I'd really like you to help enlighten people as to what that might look like if you're going to deep dive into this world of keto or even lower carb, higher fat.
Yeah.
What does that look like, and how do we do that well to maintain nutrient sufficiency? And perhaps even just look at different groups of people where it's a great idea and maybe not such a great idea. I really
exactly,
like
yeah.
I really like your point too.
No, go. Perfect.
Having enough intuition about your body to realize, like you said, over that Christmas period of time, you needed to up your carbs, you needed to down regulate that training a little bit, and also know that that's what your body needs. You didn't blow out, you didn't get morbidly obese, you didn't lose all of your ability to, have strength and stamina and all that sort of stuff. You still, maintained a really healthy, strong, mobile body, but you did what you needed to be healthy.
Yeah, and it's just implementing simple things like the check-in and the daily buy-in and those sorts of ideals. And once you start to have some of those ideas and systems in place, everything just becomes a bit easier.
Yeah. All right. I will link to Chris's website below, but it's primalauthentics.com.au. I'll also link to Chris's Facebook page, his Instagram, and all this will be over on YouTube as well, so you guys can find it all again there later. Anything else you want to say, Chriso?
Cool. No, the Primal Authentics website's coming out in a couple of weeks. At the moment, it's still on the healthandfitnessguide.com.au. And but no, I'm just about to release a men's 45-day transition program. So I'll jump on with you again and chat about how we can get men back into a sort of a healthy lifestyle in their 30s and 40s.
Absolutely, with minimal fucking about and minimum effective dose.
Exactly right.
Thanks, Chris.
Cool.
I'll talk to you soon.